What's going on, guys? It's Mohammed, the host of Aware Alpha. And today we have a special guest here. And I know the people that have been listening to the podcast the last few months, I have been saying that I'm going to start bringing more guests on. And really, as I was planning on bringing guests, one of the main things for me was this podcast, when it started, it was a podcast for me to share my own journey, the last decade, everything that I've been through and the things that I've been doing. And as I started to do the podcast, I realized that there are people in my life and there are people that I connect with that I learn something from, that my heart calls to reach out to them. And there's something that by interacting with them, I learned something from them. And my intentions were to start bringing these type of people onto the podcast and really asking them questions, having a conversation, and sharing that with everyone that's listening to the podcast. And you guys know already, one of my biggest intentions for the podcast is not for you to only be entertained, but also learn something from it, take it away from it, and go and implement it in your day-to-day life. And today we have a special guest. He goes by the name of Quest. He's a trainer, holistic coach, and a body and energy worker. So Quest, first of all, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely, man.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. One of the main questions I have as we get started here is, because myself, I was a skeptical of energy years ago. You know, people would say your energy is alive, or when you walk into a room, I can feel your energy. But myself, I was always even today, I still am a skeptic of energy, even though I am, doing a lot of the work and I am in this industry or space. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what's energy to you, or how would you describe it to somebody that is not aware of energy work and they're really just in their physical body and they think the physical body and the physical presence is all there is? So how would you describe it, and just kind of dive deep onto that for me, because I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
So recently, kind of coming more into a space where I want to practicalize things, because once you start coming into awareness, I don't even like using the words like woke or, when you wake up, it's like you've always been awake. But once you're coming into awareness, once you're getting your mind back, or you're gaining your mind, right? Because for a decent amount of your lifespan is, your mind was made for you via your mother, right? Your family, the people that influence you, until you step out into the real world. And then you start to get that mind back, right? So I realized where it was like, we can kind of get lost in the hype because society likes to turn things into recreation. It likes to make it fads, right? So we kind of eat that up. So once I came to a space where I wanted to practicalize and take away all the glitter, take away all the fancy lettering and, energy and, all the language that they use, right? Because it's trying to pull you in so that they can sell you something. And of course, they'll always give you a bit of what you actually need, because the spirit recognizes what it can use from that. Right. But to me, right, it's like, we'll say things like, everything is energy. So in some sense, energy work is really just life.
Yeah.
Energy work is really just life, right? If we're going to say stuff like that, right, as a collective, if we're going to subscribe to the notion that everything is energy, well then, right, to do energy work is basically just to live your everyday life, because you see energy everywhere.
No, it's very true.
I'm looking at you right now, and then I can also see the space that you're in. That is also a representation of energy, right? So it's like, we have to kind of start realizing, or at least really like figuring out, it's like, the whole planet is energy. So we're living in energy, right? So then it's like, we kind of have to always tailor, okay, which part of the thing are we talking about?
So how could one, so let's say somebody is new to this concept and they're curious, they want to learn to become more aware of their own energy. They might have learned about sexual energy, maybe listen to one of my podcasts or something, or my videos on Instagram, and they want to build awareness. Like, they just want to build an understanding on how can I start kind of becoming aware of my energy, or to pinpoint my energy, or to just get some kind of awareness around it, how
Of it,
would you,
right?
how would someone go about that?
So first you would, right, or at least in our upbringing, in most humans, right, is in the beginning of your life, your energy is just full on expression because,
Mm,
right, the child doesn't really have much of a like a structured thought process. It's
mm,
go. So, right, is as you're a child, all you're doing really is just expressing, 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 right? And so that's the energy that you emit.
mm,
You're more like the sun when you're younger, right?
mm,
And then as you then now get introduced into society, you know, the manners that you're taught, it
mm,
starts to now change that energy. You're not
mm,
so expressive anymore. You're careful now.
mm,
You pay attention to this. The fork goes in the right hand,
mm,
the knife goes in the left, which is all changing your energy. It's changing because initially, right, is being aware of your energies is being aware of yourself,
mm,
right? And everyone individually and personally knows their energy. They know the things that they go through. You know what irritates you. You know what makes you happy, right?
mm,
You know what catches your attention. So
mm,
it's really hard to put a word, like an
mm,
actual description on energy,
mm.
because it's everything once again.
Yeah. And it's so
Yeah,
true. And everything that you just mentioned, it actually resonates with me so much because you're so right. Like energy is just awareness. If you
exactly.
want to become aware of your energy, you just become aware of yourself, your life, your strengths, your weaknesses, your flaws, why you do certain things, who influenced you to do these certain things. And it's interesting because you just kind of expanded the meaning of energy for me. I always, I share a lot on self-awareness and how self-awareness is super important to become your most, happiest, to get in touch with your highest self, to become enlightened, to understand just more of what's holding you back in your life, how to get to the next level. Any of these things, I always say self-awareness is the main thing because self-awareness is the process of understanding yourself, understanding your strengths, weaknesses, and all the whole 9 yards. So
Right.
anyone that's listening to this podcast right now, if you're trying to become more aware of your energy, to tap into your energy and start to use this energy towards productive manners, towards your goals, towards your anything that you have in your mind, the best way to start using your energy to become aware of it is from based on what you were just saying is to just simply become more aware. Simply become more aware, which leads to the next question, which I have here is I would one start the process of becoming more aware. I usually suggest on
Right.
like journaling or start meditation, start a gratitude practice. But meditation is really a main thing I say because that's when you start to calm the monkey mind down and start to actually listen to that inner voice. And that inner voice will start to bring up things that you can acknowledge,
Hmm.
process, integrate. But I'm very curious to hear in your words and the way you explained it on how could one start to become more aware in their life? How could they start that process?
Um, So that was I was gonna add that to
Mm,
what you were saying before, which is right, is to become more aware. But obviously, it's like you have to show people how, because
mm,
usually as children, we're always told to be certain things, but never
mm,
shown how.
yeah.
And then the child has to go make its own mind up of what you think that is,
Mm,
which will almost always be wrong.
mm,
So I realize, right, is if we just look at it plain and simple,
mm,
right, is to become more aware, one, you have to realize that you always were.
mm,
There has never been a time where you haven't been aware.
hmm. That's profound.
It's that simple, right? Because
Mm,
there's never been a time where you actually can say, yeah, I wasn't aware.
mm,
You've always been aware. And you can also be aware of not being aware,
mm,
right?
hmm,
Which means if you didn't know something, your awareness hadn't expanded to that area
mm,
until you found it. So then you can go, yeah, I didn't know that,
mm,
right? But you've always been aware. It's just in the beginning, or at least for half of your life, I'll say, from like 1 to 12,
mm,
your awareness is tailor-made for you. So you're kind of like on autopilot. Because a child doesn't wake up and plan a day. It has things to do that for it, right? Whether it's family or school, right? Extra, activities, whatever it is. The child's mind is already pre-programmed, right? And this is also why sometimes once we leave home, it's so hard for us to gain awareness, because you're so used to always having it made for you. So now you go through basically what, once again, the fancy words they'll throw out there, the dark night of the soul, and everyone's going through an expansion and people are waking up. It's really is your awareness. Now you're getting it back. You're getting it back because for a long time it was made for you. So to start to become more aware, you have to realize that you are always aware.
That's
right?
Interesting. That's so interesting.
You always were aware. Right. So that means that there is no fancy balls of fire, or, hoops of fire you need to jump through to get there. It's just realizing, right? You're now seeing it again. So realizing that, hey, oh, wait, I guess, I've always been aware because I've always been here. I've been alive.
Yeah.
That's why we're able to have this conversation right now. So I've always been aware, but now that I realize that I've always been aware, that also means that, hey, I can control how wide it goes and how narrow, which is, hey, I see that thing outside of me. I have interest in it. Let me expand to it. Or I can just go, no, I'm going to stick with what I know and only what I know. But is you don't have a choice here but to expand.
That's so awesome.
Because you breathe in and then you breathe out. The heart is also, so you don't have a choice. It's the nature of this place, right? So you have to expand whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Right. So then now, if your life is hard, then that means now you are fighting against either an expansion or a retraction, right? Because that's how it moves. It goes out and then it comes back in, right? And you can tell because that's how we breathe.
Yeah.
Right. You inhale, expand, right? Now it comes back in. So also have to know what's going on in your environment. So really to widen your real awareness, you have to learn nature. You have to, right? So that would be the next step is, okay, I've always been aware, but now I've realized that I've always been aware. So that means that, one, I am awareness. I have awareness. So now I can expand it and I can contract it. So what was here before this awareness got here? Nature, the thing that you live in. So, right, then you go to the next step, is now you want to learn nature, right? Right. So like I look at farmers, for instance, to me, they're like real magicians.
Yeah.
Because to be able to grow, which is manifestation, right? To be able to grow something utilizing the elements, right? Is they need to learn certain things about the seasons, about nature, about the land, right? About the air. So then, right, is now the human can now start to expand their awareness by learning the thing that they're in. But you have to look outside of the city because the city is like the cloak. Right? It keeps you in. So you don't see outside of the city that you live in, right? So the city kind of traps your awareness.
Very true.
Right? Until you go outside of the city, or until you go to a different country, or until you go to a different province and you go, whoa, I didn't know you guys did things like this here. Boom, awareness expanded. Right? Not because you're learning. And right, is the awareness is like an AI.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
It's just an intelligence. It wants to learn and create.
And I always say self-awareness is understanding. And the way you just explained it actually totally blew my mind out, because I've been on this journey of self-awareness last few years, and of course increasing my self-awareness. But when you just said that, we have always been aware. It's
Right.
more that I just wasn't aware that I was aware,
Right.
right? And
Right.
when I started to become self-aware in a sense of, doing questionnaires and trying to understand myself, finding what are my weaknesses, what are my strengths, or what are things that are holding me back. As I was doing that, I was only getting an understanding of things that I was already aware. I already added. I was already, this information, these things were already in me.
In
I
you,
was
right.
just becoming aware of them by giving them attention, right?
Right.
So that's a very profound way of looking at it. And it's interesting because, there's a saying that you probably have heard as well. It's like, and it's a lot of the law of attraction groups that will share something like this, like everything we want is already within us, and I was always like, I always wondered about that. Like, what does that mean? Everything we want is within us. And it's so true. Actually, the last few years, as I've started to, tap into nature, tap into myself, tap into just listening to my own inner voice, it's interesting, our intuition, we can call it, those answers are all there. Those answers are all there. That if you just listen and give yourself time, if you nurture your mind, if you, spend time with yourself, those answers all truly just start coming. And everything was within me, which we were talking about, the awareness, like it's actually in you. It's
Right.
on us to give it attention. It's on us to put our focus into it, and then watch it comes up. Like if I go into nature, my mind is getting expanded. Anything new that we learn, our mind is getting expanded,
Right.
and which is increasing our self-awareness of the thing. It doesn't mean that we weren't aware before. It's because that we're giving it attention right now, which is increasing that awareness on that topic or on that subject, on those matter, right? It's very
Right.
interesting. What I wanted to share was here, just because as the listeners of the podcast are listening, I wanted to get an understanding of Quest and to just give them a little background on like where you came from. I know when we spoke last time briefly, I was actually kind of a little mind blown that you actually weren't even grown in Canada. You were born somewhere else. So yeah, give them a little background, share a little bit on yourself, how you even and transition into, how you even got into energy work and what you're into these days. Because I think one of the beautiful things about everyone that's in the space and the individuals that I meet, they all have a very unique story. It's and how that transition happened where they were, they weren't aware that they were aware, and then they started a process, they got into something, they met a girl that told them something about something, and that started the process, the transformation to where you are now. So yeah, give the listeners just a little background on who is Quest and how he came about what he's about these days.
That's a loaded question. Yeah, because like to unpack that, I would have to give you my whole entire life story.
Just give it like
Right.
brief, like where you
Right.
came from.
Right.
Because I think that what I found fascinating was because myself, I wasn't born in Canada. So when I found out that you weren't born in Canada as well, that kind of made me feel like we connected in very well. But it's also just from my experience, anyone that uh, wasn't born in this country and they came to this country, it's like their experiences and their understanding of things is different than, let's say, individuals that were born in this country. And
Right.
nothing wrong with people that were born here or not. It's just I found that their stories, their experiences, their philosophies of life is almost different than the
A little
individuals
bit.
that they grew up, right? So yeah,
Right.
share it away, whatever
Right.
comes off the top of your mind.
So yeah, being born in Ghana, which is in West Africa.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I put myself in the seat of the spirit as the observer, right? And now I am putting Quest through this trial or this path, right? It seemed whatever the spirit was trying to develop in me, or the awareness that it was trying to develop, right, was one that was it had some kind of like roots and culture to it. Right. So being born in Ghana and being raised in a different, just a different space altogether. Right. So obviously life in Ghana, it's a lot different than Canada. It's a little bit more strict. Right.
Oh yeah.
I also haven't been there in a long time. So I can't say where it's at right now.
Yeah.
But when I was there, right, I went through the school system, and I was also brought up in a military family. So my upbringing there was a little bit more strict. So it put certain work habits
Okay.
in me. And it's a very like proverbial, so right, it's like old school, basically everything was served to you in like proverbs. It was always, you know what I mean, like that kind of stuff, like
Okay.
the monkey did this, and
Yeah.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? So we also got to see the world from a different space. And then I remember the transition here coming to Canada, and then now I'm seeing this place, right? And I go from not really having lights on to the lights were always on, right? And I'm like, whoa, like, damn, okay,
Yeah.
right? And you go to the grocery store, you go from having like small pockets of markets here and there
Yeah.
until you go to a grocery store and you're like, yo, there's this mansion over here and it's filled with food. Like, what? Right. So as a child, there was a bit of a wow factor in there, right? And then also, right, is whenever we would have the opportunity to see movies and stuff like that, right, is then you're like, wow, no, this stuff is actually real. Like I remember the first time I saw snow, I was like, oh my God, right? I was like, this stuff is actually real. But once I was coming into awareness, and actually hit me at a younger age, and perhaps it was going from one country to another, because then, right, is I was coming in with a different type of programming, and now I am being merged into, say, the first world programming.
Yeah.
So now I am seeing the difference, right? So now I'm actually being forced to expand my awareness. And that's still while I was on autopilot, right? So it's like the awareness, the insights, the realizations, I started having those where I was like, wow, and to be honest with you, I was like, hey, like the kids here are very like, I was like, they're lazy.
Spoiled.
They're exactly, I'm like, you guys have everything, like they don't know how to do anything for themselves. But right, is that is just because I was on a path that had a deficiency in, say, like family, in, because I also for a small part grew up without my mother.
Okay.
Right. So I also didn't have the convenience of, where I would see the bond between a mother and child here. Right. And it's like, I mean, a mother's love is a mother's love, but like being in here, right, there's more freedom of expression here. So you saw it almost to the full extent, So it was like from a younger age, start seeing some comparisons, between the two grids. So it also kind of gave me a bit of wits about me, because I saw all my opportunities, because I don't want to say I came, well, yes, essentially we all came from nothing, but is, coming from a space where I couldn't get whatever I wanted, like that.
Yeah.
And right, also too is, all right, I was also not in the space where I could manipulate my parents to get me that. Right. Because you see how children ask for things here versus there it's, hey, you better do this, and that before you even think about asking.
Yeah, very true.
Right. Versus here, where it's, the softening of the voice, the batting of the eyes, and then it's like, here you go. But that's also because there is so much like a surplus of things here. So my awareness started building, and I think I was meant to have, obviously I was meant to have that, because I was already seeing that comparison at a younger age. And then just certain things that had happened to me, like going through physical trauma, being hit by a car, and then having to go through the healing process, right? So now that is traumatic. So that will stay with me. I will remember that, right? So then it also brought me into the realm of wanting to work with the human body.
What age were you when you got hit by a car?
I believe I was 6 or 7.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was crossing the street to go buy cookies.
Okay.
Friggin' cookies. And then I got hit by a taxi, right?
Oh, wow.
And where it's like, now that I have my own mind and I can see how things manifest and I can create the story, right? I can say, hey, I can see the symbology in what happened there. Because a taxi to me is something that takes a person from point A to B.
Yeah.
That's basically what coaches do. Right. And a coach itself is a taxi as well.
Yeah.
Right. You can fly coach. Right. So a coach gets you from one spot to one spot. So right is, some people ask me like, so like, like, how do you get to all this place? And I was like, I paid for it. I got hit by a taxi. And then I had to go through the healing process. That all stayed with me. But then now there was something in me that wanted to provide that for other people.
That's amazing. I just want to say, first of all, it's amazing that like most people will get hit by a car and never look at it in a positive aspect of it, that like that was actually a message, that was a lesson, that was some for me to become aware of something, right? Like the way you just explained that, that's actually so beautiful to look at it, where you're like, that taxi hitting me
because like we forgot how to transmute negativity. And that's one of the things we lose as children, because your mother will teach you not to be spiteful, but you need spite because it's in the spectrum of whatever we're feeling. Right. Is obviously, as a child, it's more direct, it's more harmful. Right. But if you notice, as a child, when someone told you you couldn't do something, that's all you wanted to do. Right. And I remember sitting there and thinking and asking, when do we lose that? Why do we lose that? Right. So I feel like at some point in time, and also because we've become such a positivity culture, but I'm like, everything comes from the negatives because it creates infinite possibility.
Very true.
Right. So I'm like, if you're trying to run away from negativity, you're also running away from growth, because there is nothing to transmute then. But right, it's like, we have to be able to bite enough of it. But right, is usually when we subscribe to negativity, you kind of plummet head first into the deep end of it. And then now you're trying to swim back up to surface. Right. So it's like I started realizing, right, as my awareness was kind of coming back into it, or at least I was gaining my awareness, right, is, hey, don't just go and throw yourself into negativity. Take as much as you can. Bite off enough, chew it, swallow it, process it, digest it, let it go, and then go for more. Don't go and take the whole thing, bring it home with you, and then you don't know how to transform it. Yeah. So I realize like we've also forgotten what to do with negativity.
It's right. Like, and it's so interesting because one of the messages that I talk about and I share a lot is about our emotions and expressing these emotions. And one of the reasons why a lot of us don't express our, the happy emotions, everybody's okay with expressing it, right? When you're happy, when you're, peace, joy, and all these things. But, most people don't express their sadness and their greed and their all these different negative emotions that as human beings we can feel. And one of the things I always share is to welcome all emotions, like express and process every certain thing. So if it's a negative emotion, don't just try to push it off to the side or try to pretend like it's not there. No, actually, same thing. Feel that emotion, process it, feel where it is in your body. Everything is a message. The negative emotions and the positive emotions is a message. It's trying to tell you something. And I think what you were just sharing is like, yeah, like it's at the end of the day, even when there's negativity, you can actually learn to transmute that negativity into not only positivity, but into productivity, into something that you can put your heart and your mind into and learn from, right? So my question is, so as you, like, when you're saying you obviously just, hitting a car hitting you was very traumatic, right? And what age do you feel like you found out that car accident was actually something that caused you to wait the way you are today? Because some people, let's say, like for me, I wasn't until like I was 27, 28 when I realized that, everything that I experienced as a child actually affected me and made me the adult I am today. And how I react to certain situations, how I react in relationships, these are all actually results of that little child and what he experienced a long time ago. and I'm
Right.
only just expressing it now through my physical form, which led me to doing a lot of inner child work and, you know, all the trauma work that I have been doing the last 3-4 years. So for me, I'm very curious, like, at what age were you able to kind of just, the awareness came to you where you're like, wow, that car accident was actually, even though it was a positive, it brought, you know, it taught me, and it brought this awareness for me. At what age were you able to like realize, like, okay, like that was actually a traumatic experience that affected me mentally and physically and emotionally, and now I gotta actually heal this trauma, I actually process that experience? What age?
So as you were asking the question, it was almost like the memory dial was like spinning. So I remember, I would say maybe around 16, 15 to 17, around there. And I
Okay.
remember telling my mom, because I think this was when around like 14, 15, because then we were getting ready to go to high school, right? So we were choosing our courses and all that stuff. And I remember saying that I wanted to be a masseuse. Back then, that's what we called it. It was a masseuse, right?
Okay.
And I remember her looking at me like, why do you want to touch people? Right? Now, also in the culture that I come from, usually, right, is in certain parts of the world, children don't really have much of a say. Like here, children are heard here. Right? Children are heard, you know, they can speak their mind, they can tell you how they feel, right? Even here, I realize like a lot of children don't see a difference between them and the adult. They don't really see, hey, like if you can do it, why can't I do it?
Yeah.
Right?
They
Where
almost
you
feel
come,
superior, you know?
right? They feel entitled to, right? Versus I came from a culture where it was like, listen, obey,
Yeah.
right? Or take your punishment, right? So it was just kind of like shut down right then and there. And I didn't revisit that again until I was like 25. So from like around 14 to 17, I didn't revisit that back until I was 25. And then I decided, I became a barber. I was a barber for about like 13 years at that time.
Okay.
And I was just like, man, like I'm tired of this. Right. But I also know that barbering was to build, it was teaching me how to build rapport. It was teaching me how to talk to people. It was teaching me really and truly, because when I'm cutting hair, that's a form of energy work in itself.
Of course.
Right? Because now I am very close to your mind. Right? And as I'm cutting the hair, people let me in. Right? Because I am now adding value to you. And people like that when you add value to them. So if now I'm beautifying you, which will also increase your vibration. Because once you look good and you're damn, you feel the increase in frequency, right? And now it stays with you. Now you're walking around like, you know, you're the guy, right? So that person that able to do that to you, you kind of give them a level of trust. So it taught me how to do that. But once I was like, man, I've been doing this for too long. And then I sat there and asked myself, like, what were all the things that I wanted to do as a child that I was told no? And now that I realize that I am no longer captive to that world anymore, right? Not to say that I was in prison, right? But there's a lot you can't do when you are being supervised.
Yeah, very true.
Just like when you're at work, you can't just pull out a cigarette and smoke right there. Right?
Very
So
true.
once I left home and I was like, oh, hey, you're out of the house. Change your thinking, change the awareness, because even after you leave home, you still do things like you're still at home.
Yeah, trying to please mom and dad, you know?
Right, exactly, right? Is you're still trying to, the standards that they set for you is still hovering over you. And they create little whispers, and then right, that tailors how you do things, which is then dimming your self-expression, or your light will say, right? So once I was sitting there and I'm like, yeah, like I'm not at home anymore. Why am I still behaving like, you know, I'm supposed to be this good little child? And, you know, so then I said, what are the things that I wanted to do? They said no.
Mm.
I wanted to do masseuse. I wanted to be a masseuse, massage therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a course.
Mm.
Why? Because I am good with my hands,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then from taking massage, I started to learn about energy because
Mm.
once again, with awareness, I would go, how come when I work on some people,
Mm.
I feel like crap afterwards?
Mm.
Why?
Mm.
It's like there's certain people I work on, and then I'm like, I just feel like I want to throw up. What is
Mm.
that?
Mm.
What is that? Where
Mm.
and then right is now, boom, another expansion. Let me
Mm.
go find out because I'm feeling
Mm.
something in me and I don't understand it.
Mm.
You know, I went near someone. I was working up the neck towards the head, and I got a rush of heat,
Mm.
and I almost passed out.
Mm.
And then I was like, "What is that?
Mm.
Why is this happening?
Mm.
I'm scared right now.
Mm.
I
And
don't
is
want to."
this is around the time where you feel like you started to become aware of your own traumas or the experiences that you had with the car accident when you're doing this energy work and you're starting to do these things.
So this would be once I start. So once I came into awareness of it, right, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't revisit it again until I was about 25, right,
Okay.
and wanting to switch up things. So then once then I went into massage and
Mm.
being fully embedded in that, giving it all my all, right. It
Mm.
opened another gateway,
Mm.
which was to the things that I was feeling, and the girl I was with at the time was like, well, like, let's go to this crystal expo.
Mm.
And then it bridged into another world, you
Mm.
know, to add to the modality of
Mm.
things that I do. But yeah, to answer your question, it was at 25 is where I decided to take the power
Mm.
to do things,
Mm.
to take that power and just assert it and go, yes, I'm going to do this. Because when I brought it up at 17, it was denied,
Mm.
right? Because especially if you have, say, like immigrant parents, they want you to be a doctor
Yeah, doctor,
or
lawyer,
right, or a pilot, because
Yeah.
they, right, sometimes they do, and they did, they gave
Mm-hmm.
us opportunity by bringing us here, right?
Yeah.
But also it's that opportunity isn't everything,
Mm-hmm.
because is, well, of all the things you could fall victim to here, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then also because that multiple opportunities, it has its opposite,
Mm-hmm.
which is multiple things you can become victim to.
Mm. Very true.
Drugs, right? Alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
sex, which
Yeah.
is hypersexualized here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Almost back home, it's like a taboo. You don't see stuff like that,
Yeah, no.
right? Like I would be like, when do my parents even do that? Like, you
Mm-hmm.
don't, right? But here it's like it's very hyper
Yeah.
in that realm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was around 25 I decided to actively
Mm-hmm.
engage in actually trying to bring healing to other people.
Nice. And
Yeah.
by obviously also healing your own self and the things that you were, that's amazing. And, actually, the question that comes to my mind here and a thought is energy work, and especially in this world, hypersexuality, it's just everywhere, right? You come into this
Hmm.
world, especially in North America, which kind of leads me into what was your experience coming to this country at a young age, and your first experiences with pornography and watching pornography. And it's interesting, even like think about myself when I came to this country, those early years, it was mind-blowing, because I grew up in Afghanistan, lived in Pakistan, and there you don't really have access to these kind of things. I remember would
Right.
watch explicit pictures sometimes when my brother would be on a computer, and the computers you'd be at these stores where you can rent them for an hour. Him and his friends are like watching these pictures of naked girls and everything. And then when I think about this country, and when I started discovering watching porn and how hyper stimulating it was, and no wonder it gets people into this, like it gets you addicted to it. And at the same time, it's like at the age of 12, 13, 14, for myself, it's like this is how you're also getting educated on women and sex, which is the literally not the best way to get educated at all, because pornography is only just simply making you more addicted to the product, right? So one of the things that I'd love to hear from you as well is, how do you feel, or what are your thoughts on pornography, which is another form of releasing your sexual energy, and how do you feel like it's affecting the man, not only in this world but overall? And I share this and I talk about this a lot in my programs and on my podcast, is because one of the things I help men with these days is to get over watching pornography, teaching them how to transmute their sexual energy into, you know, productive things, starting that side hustle, to talking to that girl that they really like, instead of them releasing all that sexual energy through jerking off, ejaculating. And, you know, studies are out there. It shows, you know, watching pornography repeatedly, over compulsive use of porn leads to lower sex drive, lower self-confidence, lower self-esteem, so many things, right? So what I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this? You know, what are your thoughts on, do you feel like porn is, you know, really destroying men out there? Is it really, you know, taking something away from them that they could be using in a much productive manner? Or, you know, just I always love to hear from other men, what are their thoughts on pornography, and, you know, how do they feel like it's affecting not only them but the men in this world?
Mhm. Um, so with that, I always realize that there's always like a catch 22 with
Mm.
everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always a catch 22, because once you realize that everything here provided, everything part of this construct, right?
Mm.
It has a spiritual component. So if it's here, it
Mm.
also exists on the other side. It's
Mm.
materializing here in whatever form that it's materializing as.
Mm.
Um, and the catch 22, right, is that it can either, it's kind of like how I think there was the one saying, right? It's like the devices turn into devices,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
They put you in a vice grip,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we create things, but then somehow we end up letting the thing that we created assert dominance
Mm.
over us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and I've spoken to urges and try to dial into the nature of urges, because it was
Mm-hmm.
something that I had to deal with myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized, right, is the real currency here is your creative ability,
Yeah.
which it comes from having your own mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your sexual energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything is based out of sex.
Yeah.
Everything is sex,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the true nature of your spirit, it's almost orgasmic,
Mm-hmm. Very true.
right? Right? It's orgasmic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a product. If I can manufacture it, yes, I can pull there a lot of souls towards
Mm.
it, especially souls that have already drained of their creativity.
Mm.
And there are many ways society will drain your creativity on this
Mm-hmm.
planet. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. So obviously, yes, you can start with the hypersexualization, because
Mm-hmm.
now, right, and I will, it's weird, even just in my 30s, my early 30s now, I would tell
Mm-hmm.
younger guys, you know, girls, I'm like, hey, like, you know, just especially to the women, because I'm like, you hold that power,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I'm like, it almost seems like most men had the world insights
Mm.
until they got baptized into those waters,
Mm.
until they were exposed to that world, right?
Mm.
But because the true nature of your spirit is sexual,
Mm-hmm.
so it has a way to just really pull your attention, because it's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's a primal energy,
Yeah.
right? It is the reason why souls come here,
Mm-hmm.
right? It has to go through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Something has to penetrate something else,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's the penis into the vagina,
Mm-hmm.
the sperm cell penetrating the egg,
Yeah.
right? So it has a way of pulling your attention, because it has so much charge to it,
Mm.
right? And some cultures will create a taboo around it, which I
Yeah.
don't think is a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then some cultures will just go, here, take it. which is also not the best either, right? So I started realizing where it was like, okay, my sexual energy is tied to my creative energy. So now I see why they would want to serve you with that, because they don't want you to have your own ability to think and to create for yourself, right? Is the real business is convenience.
Very true.
Right? It's convenience. Let me make this convenient for you. Oh, you don't need to engage with a woman. Just watch this. This is easy. This is easy. You can get the same stimulation without having to go through the trials of merging with someone, clearing your downfalls, clearing, becoming aware of, your social interactions, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever it is, right? All the things that are blocking you from actually being able to perform in society or in the public. You'll rather stay indoors, right? And I can only say, because once again, I fell victim to it. And I always realized the true teachers have to hit rock bottom in those worlds.
Yeah.
Right? You have to go to the deepest end to be able to see what it does to you.
Yeah.
Right? And then I'll go, yeah. I'll hear some kids boast about, yeah, man, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I'm like, wait till your knees start to hurt.
Yeah.
Wait till your joints, it feels stiff, because, right, you're draining yourself of this fluid and you don't even understand how your body makes it.
That's so deep.
But right. And so it's like, once you start realizing that, right, it's like I started to realize, my mental acuteness, it was wavering. My physical energy, that was wavering. So all the things that I was becoming deficit of, I was becoming more lazy. Why? Because I just kept spilling, right? But because there is no boundaries, there is no guidelines, right? You now go right deep into it. And so once I started seeing what it was doing to me physically, what it was doing to me mentally, and then also the lack of emotional intelligence, because, right, is for a man to have or even remotely start to learn the emotional realm, you have to integrate yourself with a woman.
Of course. That's so
right?
true.
The first is your mother, but when she's no longer around, you have to continue those studies, right? Which would be the element of water, to be able to master water, right? You have to integrate with a woman.
Very true.
So, right, is also I started seeing the fear of wanting to merge with a woman, right? Because now it forces you, because the woman will always, she will reflect what you are back to you, because you're putting into her.
Yeah.
So how she's reacting now, right, is based off what you are. And she will communicate that to you. And if you don't like what you're hearing, I'll just go watch porn, because it's just easier for me to deal with that than having to listen to this. Right. But once again, we had so much convenience growing up. So once you leave, there should almost be a whole school to learn these, like to relearn these things.
No, it's so true. And like one of my biggest passion is that in the next few years is to actually start a nonprofit organization educating, men between ages of 12 to 16, because that's when you start to discover these things about yourself. And, you discover like, oh, my penis is hard. And you start to understand, like get a feeling of these urges and temptations. And I feel like, and that's when, pornography these day and age actually takes a hold of you. And then now you're getting addicted to these systems. And based on what you were saying, it's the same thing for me. I was masturbating, jerking off my early 20s, all my teens. And it was around the age of 24, 25 is when I started to just become aware of, my weaknesses, like not being as motivated after jerking off and feeling weak and all these things. And it just became like an understanding where I'm like, wow, okay. And at the same time, I started researching and reading, how boxers don't, ejaculate, weeks before they fight. And, watching, just reading about it started to expand my mind in a sense of like, wow, okay, I can actually use this energy towards other things. And that was the beginning of me actually transmuting my sexual energy into starting, businesses and traveling and actually having authentic, genuine relationships with women. And another thing I wanted to share here is that what you shared was so profound about, for me, I was never in a very healthy relationship in all my early 20s. And I never really had that respect for women. And because of the fact that watching porn all the time, porn almost gives you this perception of what a woman is and what a woman likes. And like, it just wasn't, didn't have any intimate, real, genuine connections with women. And it's almost like I always looked at it as if like, I'm going to use this for sex and that's it. And that was very destructive. And for me to now look back to where I am now, being thankful for the most amazing feminine women in my life, being thankful for the relationships that I've had in the last 2 years, 3 years, where, it truly, you're so right. Like a woman really, like that emotional relationship is when you truly find out where you are mentally, physically, emotionally, right? Because if a woman is, triggered by something that you do, or if it's a mirror, it's literally, it's a mirror. Or like if I don't like something I see in the woman that I'm with, it has nothing to do with her. It's like simply about what is it inside her, or what is it about her that's reminding me of something in myself that I don't like, and I'm being triggered in this moment. So the best way is
also being able to like communicate that.
So
right?
true.
Right. Because I wouldn't say be quick to always, yes, it's a mirror, but yeah, right, is because you're dealing with another person. They also have their pits and their downfalls, and and that's also going to be brought up, right? So it's the communication and then the comprehension, right? So you could be saying something to me, but do I understand what you're saying? So then now people have to be able to learn how to communicate by showing, right? You don't tell a child something, they don't get what you're saying. Show it to them and they're like, So right, is the communication. If, and because of also the shame that has been created for us, so some guys can't go, hey babe, like, I like it when you wear this, do more of that for me, she'd be more eager to do that,
of course,
right? Instead of if you're like, you never do this. So right, is you have to learn how to communicate, which also, right, is you have to know a great deal. You have to be willing to learn who you're with. But one idea came to me, which I wanted to kind of get out before it slips me, right? Which was gaining more insight to sexual energy, right? Especially as a man, right? Is I was like, most guys can attest to this, where you get an idea in your head that it literally makes you erect. Right? So then you realize, oh, that thing is attached to my mind. Right? It's attached to my mind because I can get an idea and my body will react to it that way. Right? So what does that mean? You can accomplish something. And I would see that, notice that. I was like, man, like sometimes I'll have erections at the weirdest times. Like I could be doing something not related to what we consider sex at all, but I'm like, what the heck? Right? And I was like, so I am, in our language, we say I'm turned on. So I'm being turned on by this activity. I remember Arnold would be like, man, I'm in the gym and I'm pumping, and he's getting turned on by it. Right? He was like, right, that's what he's in one of his interviews. He's like, man, I would lift so much, man. And he's like, it just felt good. Like, right? Meaning he's doing almost in some sense what he's supposed to be doing. He's doing whatever he is destined to do, because once you find that thing, that passion, right? To say, find your passion. but right, we also tie passion to sex. So find something that turns you on, just like the act would of having sex would. And for him, it was in the gym lifting, right? So I started realizing, oh man, I'll be doing certain things and I'm like getting turned on. And I'm like, wow, okay. So this speaks deep to me because I am having this feeling based off whatever I'm engaged in. And it has no physical sexual connotation to it. So I was like, right, paying attention to that as well. So sometimes, right, is, you know, when you're, say, for instance, you're trying to plan something, you are trying to build something, you're trying to form something. And when you think about it, if it doesn't give you that kind of feeling, right, you have to now use your wits. Like, should I approach it? Should I not approach it? Right. And also, obviously, not getting lost in desire.
Of
But
course.
yeah, so
No.
it was like, that was a picture that came to mind. I was like, okay, let me get that out.
That's awesome. It's almost like what you just shared is like, if you have an idea, if you have something that you are working towards or you're making happen, and you are just as excited about it as you are when you're in the act of having sex,
Right.
that's truly, and like that's experiencing sexual energy
Exactly.
in the true essence of it, where it's creative energy. And if you're
Exactly.
creatively excited and passionate about some, I believe, that's very powerful.
Because the currency, right, is two people have sex, a child is born. A child is abundance, because now 1 + 1 is not 2, it's actually 3 now.
Yeah.
We just gained more, right? So now so children represent abundance, and children only get here, children only get here through sex.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So it's showing you physically, hey, your creative ability, yes, if we channel it only physically, yes, you will have 2,000 children. All of them, yes, will represent abundance, but yes, you also have to put into those, because you have to build the abundance, right? But then when we remove it, because there are 3 other elements, right? I can channel that creative energy mentally by sitting there and processing something, right? I can channel that creative energy with the fire aspect, right? I'm imagining. I'm creating pictures in my mind. I'm trying to see if I can get a feeling out of what I am imagining in my head, right? So I'm using the fire element, the pictures. Now I'm blowing up the pictures with air. Now I'm thinking about it. Does it create a feeling in me, which is the water element, right? And if it creates a feeling, is this a good one, right? Does this work? Can I use it? And then you now transmute that into earth, which is using the body, the physicality to get it done, right? But if we don't only channel it in the realm of intercourse, in the realm of, right, is you can create so much more.
Of course.
Right. But it's so much easier
to just release it, So true. And I feel like that's, I feel like that's one of the reasons why so many men these days are, not achieving their goals, not their after ambitions, or, not motivated, is because they just don't actually know how to release it in a healthy manner. And that's one of my biggest passions, drive, is to truly just increase men's awareness on the power of their sexual energy. But with that being said, it's been an hour. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for jumping on, my brother. The things that you shared, I truly believe that everyone listening to the podcast, they're going to take value from it. They're going to learn something from it. And I'm sure in the future, we'll make this happen one more time. And as we finish this off right now, just let the people know where they can find you, where they can connect with you, and we'll finish it up.
You can find me on Instagram. That's usually the platform that I use now, because there's just so many. There's so many platforms now, so I usually, my biggest social platform that I use is Instagram, which
Okay,
is
perfect.
last Soulbender,
Mhm.
LastSolbender, Last
Awesome.
Soulbender. You can find me there. And yeah, usually you'll see me beat up people, put them through crazy workouts, and just share the things that come to me, the realizations that come to me, because
Mhm.
not everyone is interested, but if
Mhm.
you can take that and utilize it, I'm like, by all means. I'm like, if it's not for you, hey, the faster you see yourself off my page, the better. Just
Of
I'm like,
course.
I don't want to give you anything you don't want to use.
Of course, of course. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna put your direct connection to on Instagram here in the link for all the platforms so they can find you. And yeah, man, thank you so much for jumping
Thank
on here
you.
with me. And guys,
Hmm.
everyone that's listening to the podcast, my intentions are for you to take something away from this, to not only use this for entertainment, like I always say, my intentions are for you to listen to this and pick an idea out of this and actually implement it in your day-to-day actions and learn from it. And with that being said, see you on the next episode and stay an aware alpha.